Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of morals lessons from the Quran. We will be studying another passage today, as has been our tradition, and in order to benefit from the various effects and spiritual blessings of Ramadan, one of the key factors is to remain connected as much as possible with the Quran through various modes. This includes reading the Quran, memorizing the Quran, understanding the Quran, and spending as much as time as possible in this holy month. Because as we have been discussing this all along, that fasting in the month of Ramadan is actually a means of showing our gratitude to the Almighty for giving us this gift of the Quran. So the Quran and Ramadan, they have a very special connection. The passage that we are going to study today is from Surah Ash-Shura, which is the 42nd surah of the Quran, and the words are وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشَ وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. So, while enumerating the qualities of believers, it is said that amongst other things, they are the ones who avoid grievous sins and lewd acts. So they stay away from such things and forgive when angry. وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوهُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. And those who responded to the call of their Lord were diligent in their prayer and conduct their affairs by mutual consultation and spend from the provisions we have given them. So the very first thing which is mentioned here is that who avoid grievous sins and lewd acts. So يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشِ. So one of the foremost things which believers do is that they stay away from these major sins. And of course the Quran at various instances has enumerated these grievous sins, like for example, the worst of all these major sins is polytheism, associating partners with God, and this is something which was rampant in Arabia, the land in which the Quran was revealed, and hence we have so much in the Quran which deals with polytheism. And the Quran, of course, has this detail regarding the various forms of polytheism which the Arabs indulged in. So they regarded the angels to be the daughters of God. They regarded the angels to be the daughters of God, and they would think that they would secure for them a high position in the hereafter, and therefore they would worship these angels. Similarly, they would worship the jinn, and they would have many other areas in which they would worship various deities, in thinking that these deities would once again secure for them a high place in the hereafter. So a number of forms of polytheism were associated with them. So one of these major sins is something which the Quran has pointed out. And then of course, killing someone is another heinous crime which the Quran has said. Without any justification, you are taking the life of someone, which is of course something of a huge nature and a grievous sin. Similarly, adultery, that's another major sin, and the Quran proscribes it and says that not only should you not commit adultery, but don't even go near adultery, la taqrabu zina, which would mean that things which lead us to this promiscuous act, to this absolutely disallowable act, should be abstained from. Other things which have been proscribed in the Quran and which fall in the category of major sins. So another one of them is not distributing the shares of inheritance the way they have been allocated in the Quran. So this practice of depriving daughters or sisters or the female gender in any way from inheritance which they duly deserve is again something which is called a very major sin. So the Quran says that believers are one who يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ, they abstain from such sin. And then, of course, another thing which is mentioned right adjacent is Balfawahish, which means lewd acts, which means lustful activities, which means, of course, it refers to extramarital activities. It refers to things of all sorts which are against the marriage bond, which make a person a beast, if anything else, and for want of any better word. These beastly activities, these savage activities in which you might indulge in sexual activities with animals, for example, or with, as is the case, that there are a lot of deviations, a lot of distortions in human nature, and you find necrophiles and we find pedophiles and all such areas in which people indulge not only in this activity in a way that is prohibited, but it is utterly, you feel it's such an obnoxious activity that you feel such great revulsion. So it is specially outlined that believers are ones who abstain from these activities. يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشِ. And then the Quran says, وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. And they forgive when they are angry. So, of course, this is something which is, this requires a lot of self-restraint. It's difficult to forgive people for wrongs that they have done, for mistakes that they have committed. And when you're very angry, when you think that you have been really wrong, the other person has done something very unjustified, very unjust, the amount of anger that at times arises in us is uncontrollable. But you see here, it is here that you have to control our anger. And the Quran is saying that, well, forgiving someone when you are calm is obviously something that is much more easier. But a much more difficult thing is to forgive others when you are really angry at other people and you are justified in your anger. And you know that this anger is not going to lead you anywhere, but maybe forgiving that person and making him realize or her realize how bad a thing that has been done. And forgiveness might change the heart of that person. This is absolutely, it's an onerous task. And unless you have that self-discipline, unless you have a lot of self-restraint, unless you really think that you're forgiving a person for the sake of God Almighty, you don't have the courage, you don't have that will or the motivation to forgive people. So we've also discussed this narrative a number of times, that the Prophet is reported to have said that a person who is strong is not the one who defeats his enemy in a duel, but a person is strong when he overcomes his anger. So strength of your character is directly proportional to the strength of restraining your anger. And we have to practice this a lot, because you see, each one of us goes through this phase, and anger management is a science in itself. It's an art in itself. And we must learn this anger management, and we must also teach our younger ones that how anger can play havoc. And if we are able to control it at the right instance, then and it can result in outstanding benefits for everyone. And of course, this is something that is worth a try, and not only worth a try, it's worth to be taught and learned at the same time. So, وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. And then the Quran says, وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ. And they are ones who responded to the call of their Lord, which means, of course, when the Almighty called them to righteousness. Remember, this was the time when the Quran was being revealed, and to respond to the call of the Almighty, to respond to the Prophet himself, and that too in a way that you would leave your religion and accept a new religion. It was like giving up polytheism and accepting monotheism. One can well imagine that in the Arab society, this was a huge thing to do, and it would more often than not entail a lot of physical punishment. A person would go through a lot of physical punishment, and we have stories of Bilal, we have Ammar bin Yasir, radiyallahu anhum ajma'een, who simply because they left their religion and they thought that, well, God is one, and we are not going to tolerate anything other than that, is something which at times went as far as such persecution that people were killed for it. We know that Ammar bin Yasir anhu was shred into pieces. All his four limbs were tied with camels, and they were made to run in opposite directions. And you can well imagine what happened to his body. But he did not give up, and he said that if I have professed faith in one God and given up multiple gods, then this is what I'm going to stand for. So, وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ, they were the ones who responded to the call of God. It's much easier in today's times to respond to this call. For example, it might need a lot of intellectual effort to analyze and understand. But as far as those times were concerned, we have to realize that there were times which it would be virtually impossible unless one was willing to even put one's life at stake. So, وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ, and then the Quran says, وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ, and they were the ones who were extremely devout in their prayer. And this is again something that we have been discussing so many times in these sessions, that how often the subject of the prayer is brought about in the Quran. I'm sure all of you who have this experience of continuously reading the Quran, you've seen how often the subject of the prayer is brought up by the Quran. And the reason is that this is the most fundamental directive as far as one's deeds are concerned, as far as one's actions are concerned. And so you can see that there are two fundamental directives of religion, one which relates to faith and ideology, and the other which relates to practices. So the most important directive regarding ideology or faith is monotheism or tawheed, and the most important directive vis-a-vis the prayer, your practices and deeds, is the prayer. So the Quran has just not said that they offer the prayer. It says they aqamu salah. They are diligent in their prayer. They are always planning their whole day, that where and when am I going to find my prayers, or the place or the time in my daily routine. So all their daily routine actually revolves around this planning. They are extremely vigilant in that. And of course, it goes without saying that they plan their daily routine in such a way that wherever the prayer falls, they're able to offer it in a way that their attention is focused towards the Almighty. So aqamu salah also means that they have complete focus. They are attentive to the prayer. They know that they are going to stand before the Lord of the heavens and the earth and talk to Him. And at the same time, also is important the fact that as far as the prayer is concerned, it is something which is one's best companion, or one of the most powerful means to connect ourselves to God. And remember, the month of Ramadan, as well as in all the rest of the months, one of the most important lessons that we learn, or we should learn, is this God connection, is to have a strong God connection. And no better a means than to achieve this God connection than being very vigilant and diligent in offering the prayer. The verse goes on to say, aqamu salah, and then you find juxtaposed something which is not a normal practice of the Quran. Often what we come between with the mention of salat is zakat. But here you find a break, a slightly unique directive being mentioned, and that is وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. That such are these believers that not only do they adhere to the prayer, in which of course the congregational prayer especially is one in which you are behind an imam, you are following him, and there is a discipline that you follow. So just to as an analogy to this is mentioned a very important directive which actually forms the backbone, it forms the basis of the Islamic political system, and that is amruhum shura bainahum, that their system is based on consultation. People who are governing their system, they govern their system on the basis of consultation. And this, of course, means that people are elected on the basis of consultation. And this would mean that if there is a split vote, then the majority, then the group which enjoys the majority would be eligible to have the reins of power. And at the same time, it is also essential to note that as long as that group enjoys the confidence of the majority, it has the right to rule. And once this is lost, then it loses the right to rule as well. So, amruhum shura bainahum, the Quranic term for this is shura. And if you compare it with modern forms of democracy or how democracy is evolved, you'll find that the Quran stood for democracy 14 centuries ago, before democracy, in its present form at least. Although we do have some of its vestiges in earlier parts of history, in Greek history, some people condemned it, some people adopted it, but the modern form of democracy, which developed in the last 8 centuries after the Magna Carta was signed in the 13th century, of course, this is a much later development. Much before that, in the 7th century, the Quran had said that this is the only form of government which is legitimate, which is to be adopted. The will of the people has to be implemented, and this will has to be respected by all. Of course, this is something of a detailed subject, and my purpose here is not to go into much details, or the only thing is that this is an extremely important area that needs more discussion, that the system of governance of Muslims is based on consultation, and if there is a split in this consultation, for example, if you consult people and there are people who have a split vote, then obviously the consequence of this is that those who hold the majority would be the ones who would ultimately prevail. And the last thing then which is mentioned in this verse is وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, and they are the ones who spend from the provisions we have given them. So infaq fi sabilillah, or spending in charity for the cause of God, this is something, as you can see, is clearly a very important directive of the Quran, and charity and infaq is mentioned at a number of places. And this is something which actually connects us to our fellow human beings and makes us realize that we must share our blessings. If we have been blessed by the Almighty in any way, if we are enjoying the various luxuries of life in any way, then the smallest thing that we can do is to share those blessings. And this is what the Almighty has on a number of occasions. So just as you find the mention of Salah, or the prayer, being abundantly mentioned in the Quran, the other very abundant mention right with the prayer generally is this directive of infaq, or charity, to spend in charity as much as you can, to not shy away if you have a small amount, and at the same time never boast of what you do. These are some of the pitfalls of charity. So if you have to spend something, the Quran says it is better that you hide it, because this would be something between you and your God. And the purpose of tazkiyah, which would be in self-purification, would be served the best if only you and God know what exactly you had done. Don't let other people know. And the worst thing that can happen is that you remind people of your favors, of the charity that you did to them when the time comes. So the Quran says, "La tubtilu sadaqatikum bil manni wal aza." La tubtilu sadaqatikum, that don't make your charity go waste by actually expressing the favor that you did to that person and hurting him in this way. So charity is something, again, which is something we find that the Prophet would do a lot in the month of Ramadan. In the month of Ramadan, especially, all righteous acts were something which emanated from him in a very prolific way. But about charity especially, we find the Prophet, I mean, of course, the prayer was also there, but we have so many instances from the seerah of the Prophet in which we find how charitable he would become in the month of Ramadan. So, my dear viewers, I end my talk here regarding this passage, and now I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. The first question I have Fatma.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
So regarding Qasr prayer, I've understood that you can Qasr only Asr and Zohar and Isha, like 4 rakats will become 2, and we cannot do that for Maghrib and Fajr. And regarding combining 2 prayers, we can combine Zohar with Asr and Maghrib with Isha in either time, like in Zohar or Asr time, or Maghrib Isha in Maghrib or Isha time. But how many rakats do we read?
So that is again your choice. If you like, you are combining the prayer, you can shorten and combine, and you can combine without shortening them. This is your choice. At times when you are traveling somewhere, for example, you're leaving for a destination, you are at home, and it's Maghrib time, and you might know that wherever you're traveling, it will not be easy to offer the Isha prayer. So you can pray your Maghrib and your Isha in their full rakats. I mean, this is an option that you have. And at other instances, of course, when you combine prayers, you can shorten them as well. So combining and shortening them both are options that you have, and both depend on the discomfort of the journey that you might be going through.
Okay, and also you can offer them in either time. Like for example, Maghrib, you can offer Maghrib Isha, you can offer it Maghrib time or Isha time.
Right, either of the 2 times.
Thank you.
Dr. Shehzad, there's a supplementary inquiry about it, that if people are traveling with their families, intercity travel, and if they would stop, a certain point and would offer salah as a, jamaat, a family offers the salah as a jamaat. So will it be qasr 2 rakas to be offered in congregation or 4?
You see, this is again the decision of the imam. I mean, if he would like to offer the qasr prayer, it's up to him. And the rest, if they feel that they'd like to pray the full prayer, they can pray the full prayer. If they feel that they would like to pray the qasr prayer, they can pray the qasr prayer. So it's an individual decision. Yeah, because as I said, this discomfort of the journey is something which afflicts every person differently. So it could be that the whole family, I mean, they could be undergoing the same discomfort. There could be a few of them who would not be undergoing. So it all depends. And one thing more that I can tell you is that it's not necessary at all to stop the car and do the Jamaat. I mean, if they do it, okay, it's okay. But otherwise, while traveling, you can pray within the car. Wherever and in this regard, the direction of the Qibla would not matter. I have been referring to this verse of the Quran, and you might as well do. I mean, this is one of the verses which is often missed out and neglected in the Quran. It says that while praying for rijalan aw rukbana. So in Surah Baqarah, it is said that when the time of prayer comes and you are traveling, rijalan, rukbana means you're traveling on a transport, whether it's a car or an airplane or whatever. You can travel. I mean, you can pray on that transport regardless of the Qibla. And it says rijalan also, which is often, neglected, which means when you are walking, simply walking through, and you would like to pray, so you can offer the prayer while walking as well. So stopping for the prayer is not essential at all. But if you would like to do so, then as I said, the qasr prayer is something which is an individual choice. And if the imam wishes to offer the qasr prayer and the rest of the lot does not, they can finish the prayer once he says salam. So it's basically an individual choice.
So of course, if you are the driver, perhaps, then you may not. Well, how would you?
Even while driving, I mean, there are instances in which you know that at times the roads are empty and you are able to concentrate in a way. I mean, if you're still holding the steering or even have to, turn your face right and left, even then, if this is something of a possibility, I have done this myself as well, and I've seen other people doing it as well, that if you are able to safely do this, because there are instances in which you are left with no choice, because at certain times this is the only way out. So if you're not able to stop the car, and if you have to drive the car for any reason, then you can offer the prayer while driving, of course, in a way that has to be very safe.
Thank you. Rajni, you may have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, in here, I wanted to know that in Islam, contraception is allowed or not. If not, then what type of contraception is not allowed? Like sterilization, tubal ligation, pill, copper T, condom, etc.
All types of contraception are allowed as far as they are safe and they are medically recommended. Contraception is a technique which science has developed over the years. We know that in earlier times the Sahaba, I mean, they would do this coitus interruptus, which is called azal, and this was one form of avoiding any pregnancy. But other than that, today, if science has invented various forms of contraception, and we know that there are a number of techniques, so any of these techniques which are safe and medically recommended can be adopted.
Dr. Shehzad, I have a question in the first half as well. So my question is about the presentation of Islam to the non-Arab converts of Islam in Persia, India, and beyond. So how the book of Allah was presented to them as a book to be recited without, the understanding of the meaning, or to be understood? Because my question is that has been found since my childhood, I've seen that there's a greater emphasis in enrolling young kids to madrasas, even in very, very educated families, for hifz, introduction to Arabic, scripts, tajweed. It's a much coveted practice. And during Ramadan, the recitation of the Quran has been considered as a basic threshold, a minimum threshold of ibadah, along with fasting and salah. In Taraweeh prayers, too, people think that if they're listening to the Quran, it is a performance of an ibadah. Of course, we are not Arab so we don't understand. So to me, it has appeared to be lacking in the real purpose of ibadah. It has a devotional element, and people do feel elevated spiritually. I have done it for a long time in my life too. However, a mere recitation of Quran in the Arabic language with proper nuances of articulation, tajweed, pronunciation, do you think it's even a form of ibadah? Because I did think that it was a service for a long time in my life, but now I think, is it even at a level of ibadah during Ramadan or otherwise?
Well, you see, we have to understand this, that to make something an ibadah can only, become something which is, unless it becomes a cogent ibadah, it will just become a ritual that we might do without understanding, and it might earn a very minimum reward from the Almighty, thinking that the person was perhaps trying to do so. But what is recommended is that you must teach your children the Arabic language, you must teach your own self the Arabic language, because unless you are aware of the Arabic language, and when I say Arabic language, I am actually referring to Quranic Arabic, because you see, today's Arabic language is entirely different from the Arabic of the Quran. So there are lessons, and there are websites, and there are apps. There are very good apps which have been made, very good websites, self-taught lessons, in which maybe through an effort of about a year or so of an hour per day, you'll be easily acquainted with the Arabic of the Quran. So I think that one should give much more emphasis to one's children and one's own self, that before the month of Ramadan arrives, and even when it is not the month of Ramadan, attaching ourselves and reading the Quran while understanding it is something which has to be done. So the highest recommendation would be that they read the Quran in a way that they are able to understand it. Now, when this is not possible, then the second best option is that if you are reading the Quran in your nafil prayers, I'm not saying the farz ones, in the nafil ones, for example, then it is essential that you can, if you hold the Musaf before you, and you can glance through the translation as well, so that it can have some impact on you. And in the third instance, when you're not even reading, you're not even offering the prayer, but you are just reading the Quran, then it is more essential that if you're reading the text of the Quran, then you must read it with a translation. And the fourth level is that if the text of the Quran, for example, if the Nazara Quran is not also at times, people are not very fluent. And not only they are not very fluent, they might even make errors. So if they just read the translation, whichever language they are comfortable in, that would at least be that minimum level in which they are able to understand what God Almighty is telling them. Of course, when I'm talking about this, I'm referring to the fact that they're reading the Quran outside of the prayer. Within the prayer, it is essential to read the Quran in Arabic. But then some other effort can also be done, and the surahs that you read in Arabic in the Quran, you can memorize the meanings of those surahs and connect the words also, so that when you're reading that Arabic in the Quran of that surah, you have some idea of what you are actually reciting. So you see, this is a culture that we need to create, which we have lost over centuries. Our connection with the Quran has gone away, and especially in non Arabic speaking countries, and even in Arabic speaking countries, I've seen that this is again it goes through a lot of neglect. So it is a question of how important, how much significant we make this, how much emphasis we make it in, not only for ourselves but for our children as well. This emphasis on understanding the Quran directly, because I mean, everyone who understands the Quran directly while it is being recited will tell you the huge difference it makes and the impact it has on us, because we know what what is going on. And when we are reading, we are listening to the Quran or reading the Quran without, even understanding it, it's more of a, as you said, a devotional exercise maybe, but it has zero impact as far as one's understanding is concerned.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Shiraz Ahmed, you may have your question now.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम शहजाद भाई। शहजाद भाई, ये क्वेश्चन मेरी तरफ से नहीं है, किसी ने आपका कुछ दिन पहले कोई लेक्चर सुना था, एंड दैट पर्सन कैन नॉट वाज नॉट एबल टू अटेंड योर लेक्चर टुडे, सो उन्होंने मुझे पहले ही कहा कि आपसे पूछ लूं। इट्स रिगार्डिंग द क्रिएशन प्रोसेस, वो जो सूरह सजदा में वर्स 7, 8, 9 है, जिसमें वेरी क्विकली खलक बदान का वर्ड है नंबर 1, वो उसके बाद जो नस्ल को संवारना है, नहीं, उसके बाद वर्ड है नस्लाहू, जो उनमें नस्ल की कैपेबिलिटी पैदा की। उसके बाद जो तीसरी चीज है वो सव्वाहू है, और उसके बाद आगे आपको फिर पता रूह फूंक देना। तो वो लड़का मुझसे पूछ रहा था कि शहजाद भाई ने जो पहला वर्ड है उस पे कहा कि ट्रेडिशनल उलमा ने गौर नहीं किया, बदान, दैट्स फाइन, लेकिन उसके बाद जो आगे उनका क्वेश्चन है वो ये है कि नस्लाहू का जो वर्ड है, इज इट टेलिंग अस कि जो भी चीज पैदा हुई है उसमें नस्ल पैदा करने की कैपेबिलिटी है, नस्ल पैदा करने की कैपेबिलिटी नस्लाहू से साबित है और की भी होगी, उसके बाद सवारा गया है और उसके बाद रूह फूकी की है। तो क्या ये नस्लाहू भी ये चीज पॉइंट नहीं करती कि जो चीज जमीन से क्रिएट हुई है वो हजरत आदम डायरेक्टली नहीं थे? ये क्वेश्चन है।
I think I received this question directly from that person, and I went at length to answer this person, and I told him that the word nasl here just refers to progeny. Yes, it is like telling us that de facto he was able to produce children for, the whatever the human form was created. At first, they were created directly out of clay, and later on, they had the ability to produce themselves. So the word nasl is nothing but telling us that they could produce children. So he was arguing with me that the word nasl would tell us that the nasl is something which is going to happen over a period of time. And I was trying to explain it to him that the word nasl is referring to several generations, because the Quran says bada khalqal insani min teen summa ja'ala naslahu min sulalatin min ma'in mahin. So summa ja'ala naslahu min sulala means that the people who were created from those humans or humanoids who were directly created from earth, then they were given this ability to produce directly. So the word naslahu is not referring to a series of people or a series of generations. All it tells us that that they had the ability. Now, it was not that the earth was producing them or the clay was producing them, because this was the first stage. In the second stage, whatever the humanoids were, they had the ability to create their own children. So,
so if I understood you correctly, the word naslahu does not necessarily mean that the process has been done. It means the capability has been given to the species, whatever that species was generated from the clay. right?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. That's
Right.
what I was.
So, ये आपसे confirmation चाहिए थी कि naslahu in Arabic does not necessitate the actual process, but the
Yes,
capability to do it.
yes. Potential. They were given this potential.
Potential. Okay. Okay, I will wait for my next turn. फिर मैं आपसे अगला question पूछूं. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan. You may ask your question now.
Right, thank you. I wanted to ask what parts of the prayer are the ones that must be recited in Arabic language, and what parts are necessary to be even recited? Like, I mean, I have heard that it's not necessary to recite Subhana Rabbiyal Ala in such that you can even ask God for something you want. So please can you tell me the
So
whole
the
process?
five, I think I enumerated them yesterday or maybe day before as well, that there are five utterances which are essential that they must be said in Arabic. So one of them is Allahu Akbar. Whenever you say it, I mean, you start off your takbir with Allahu Akbar, and in the rest of the times when you go for your kneeling and for prostration, so whenever you pronounce the word Allahu Akbar, it has to be in Arabic. So that is one thing. The other is that you have to recite Surah Fatiha in Arabic at all cost. The third is that you have to read the Quran right after Surah Fatiha in Arabic. The fourth is that the words Sami Allahu liman hamida, they have to be said in Arabic. And the fifth and last is Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah on both sides when you finish off the prayer. So these are the five essential utterances that has to be said in the Arabic language. At all other instances, for example, in your prostration, similarly in your while you're kneeling, similarly when you're sitting in the qada, whether it's the middle qada or the last qada, similarly in between your two prostrations when you sit. So and also when you start the prayer, when one of the du'as that we generally recite is Subhanakallahumma. So it's not just that single dua that has been prescribed. You can say anything else. So other than those five prescribed Arabic utterances, on all other instances, in all other postures, you can read any dua in any language.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. You may ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. Once again, thank you very much for your continual education for many of us. My question is really a few years ago, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, a very close friend of mine, his 18-year-old son, died from a cancer. Now, that's obviously a very tragic event. These people were Christian Catholics. So this young boy's funeral was in a very grand church, a Catholic church. Now, I've been to many churches across Europe, but as a tourist, but this was actually a proper ceremony. Now, when we went in the church, they obviously had the whole scene set up. There was the choir boys and choir girls singing, the hymns that they have from Psalms and other biblical scriptures. They had the music, they had the piano, they had their priests walking with their beautiful long robes, and there was scented smells and smoke in the church. The whole how they do the funeral prayers and everything, and that creates a huge atmosphere in the trust. And I looked around, and I had many friends in there, and majority of them have been brought up in a Christian background. Quite a few of them become seculars, but still they're indoctrinated as children. And I could see that they were all in awe. They were all in awe of the whole atmosphere. They were mesmerized. And I realized at that very point that I wasn't in awe. I was fascinated. It was such a beautiful atmosphere, but I wasn't in awe. I wasn't mesmerized. I could still look around. I was looking at, trying to understand what the hymns were, looking at the lights, the beautiful atmosphere and everything. I had all my faculties on me, whereas everybody else had their gaze down in an extremely respectful position, like we are in the mosques. And this happens to me when I go to the mosques. Obviously, the bigger the mosque, the better, the more awe or more mesmerization I get from. And I've been to some of the big mosques from Africa to Egypt and all to Turkey and all these places. So my question is, when we approach Quran, we look at Quran as a book that is divine. Nothing can be wrong in the Quran. It has to be 100% accurate. Everything that is in the Quran is right. This is what our starting position is. That's our Aqidah. If we don't believe in that, then we are not Muslim. So that's our Aqidah. When we approach Quran with this huge Aqidah as these Christians had in the church, or I have when I go to a big mosque to do my prayers, how objective can we be in translation, tafsir, exegesis, understanding, if our starting point is that there can be nothing wrong? This is the word of Allah and there can be nothing wrong with it. So how do we bring that objectivity? Because our Aqidah clearly impinges on our faculties of objectivity. I mean, this is obviously a strange question, but I'm just asking for your personal opinion.
Well, I think we need to understand that mankind needs to have this certitude and this certainty. There is this thirst for certainty. This is, and when I talk of this thirst for certainty, this is only in religious matters. So as far as the temporal sphere is concerned, as the secular sphere is concerned, this thirst is there and it has created wonders of science. So this thirst has created, on the one hand, those outstanding inventions that we get. I mean, every now and then when we get informed of them, we are amazed and astounded at what has happened. So this is one sphere. And then there's another sphere in which we have religious knowledge and religious curiosity. And that is only something which the Almighty can fill in or give, or the vacuum that is created, or the thirst that is created, is something that we cannot acquire it like through a scientific process. So the thirst for science, the thirst for temporal excellence, is something that we can do through our own curiosity, by our own intellect, and reach to great heights. But you see, man is not mere intellect in scientific inquiry. We have a mind which has metaphysical questions. All of us, we need to have those metaphysical questions solved. And a couple of them is that, where have we come from? Where have we are required to go? What happens after death? And what exactly are we required to do in this world? So I would say that these 4 or 5 very basic questions, they need certitude. And this certitude, of course, in the absence of this certitude, if you study the philosophical history of mankind, if you study metaphysics, the way it has dealt with, you'll find every person having his own say or view. Because you see, these particular questions, we don't have the means to answer them. On the one hand, we have the means to make those scientific discoveries because we are equipped with that. But on the other hand, which is a non-temporal area, which is the metaphysical area, we are not equipped with them. So it is basically those 4 or 5 basic philosophical questions that need certitude. Because in the absence of certitude, we would be pushed to a state of depression maybe, or uncertainty, and we would be always thinking of all sorts of things and not realizing what exactly is our relationship with our creator, whether there's a creator or not, and all kinds of things which are happening in this world, especially the sorrows and afflictions. They would become a thorn in our eyes, and we would not be able to understand them. So I think that what we need to understand is that the certitude that we get regarding certain things, they can be counted on our fingers. And that objectivity, or if you say that lack of objectivity, is actually the need of a human soul. It's like it's fodder. And because you cannot discover the answer for yourself or for your own selves the way you could do in science and the temporal sphere, in the non-temporal sphere, in the metaphysical sphere, in the absence of any such information, our mind would have actually not set. I mean, we would not have been able to be satisfied with the answers, or if that was the satisfaction that if a person would have achieved, it would have been either temporary or something which would again be revised over a continuous period of time. It is only this spiritual knowledge from that side of the world which gives us that certitude, and as a result we become peaceful individuals who can spend a peaceful life, at least mentally and spiritually, in this world.
Dr. Salim, I guess what my question was really, how much does our indoctrination affects our objective scrutiny of a religious scripture? A Jew would never read the Quran with the same reverence that I would, because I've been indoctrinated as a Muslim, they've been indoctrinated as a Jew. So we've been doing exegesis of Quran, and millions of us have been doing it for the last 1400 years. Huge amount of work has been done on it. And you have done some work as well. That's why I asked you this question. Do you feel that you're fully objective when you are doing your exegesis of Quran, or especially in your work when you did it with the transmission of Quran?
I think if I start off much earlier than what the work I did, my intention was to embark upon a journey of quest for the truth. And this is a journey which every one of us is required to do, regardless of where we end. So I think from the knowledge, the humble knowledge that I have from the Quran, I think that it is the real test is how sincere are we in our quest for the truth. So if we embark upon this journey in a sincere way, in a committed way, and never and always review whatever we have thought of in a critical way. So on the one hand, we are endeavoring to find the truth, and on the other hand, we are critically reviewing whatever truth we have discovered, or if other people criticize it. I think this is the basic attitude which is required for not for just a Muslim, for every single person, whether he's a Jew or a Christian or a Gnostic or an atheist. Quest for the truth in a sincere manner. And this quest for the truth in a sincere and a committed manner can lead various people to various destinations. And I do think that, inshallah, the Almighty would cater for any difference of opinion or any difference of destination which might, as a result, arise. As long as one was sincere in one's quest for the truth, he or she did not deny the cause of his conscience, he or she did not deny the existence of a God, which is something, again, the Quran tells us is part of our human nature. So I think this quest for the truth, coupled with the innate guidance that we have, this is our real test. And when we go along with these premises and do research, whether it's regarding the Quran or the Torah or any divine scripture, then we have the light through which we can actually shine through our way and find out the truth. But if the intention is not there to find the truth, or we are lazy, or we are careless, or we are indifferent, or we have, our senses towards these questions, our sensitivity to these questions is not even there, then it is here that the Almighty would, of course, might strictly behave with us. So basically, it's our call of being sincere for the cause of the truth.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Much appreciated.
Thank you. We just have this last question for today. Rafia, Pacha, please go ahead.
Dr. Shehzad, very often when you're discussing religion, people like to quote hadith. And if you try to argue, but how do you know this hadith is correct? They will say, well, it's from Bukhari, it's from Muslim. And they get quite angry when you say, but is it in light with the Quran? So what is the criteria, or what is the best way of talking to such people who give hadith as much importance as the Quran?
I think the best way is not to talk to them. You have to pick and choose your audience. People who give the same weight to the hadith as the Quran, and they are generally people who would not argue on the basis of intellect. They are basically emotionally charged. It is best to just listen to them and ignore what they have said. And you're not obliged to answer everyone. A person who is wise is a person who always picks and chooses the audience, and always picks and chooses what he or she should say or remain silent.
But Dr. Saad, when they quote like Muslim, Bukhari were very well-known books for hadith, then can you still say, but are you sure it's in line with the Quran? My criteria, it should be in line with the Quran.
Why do you need to express your own opinion unless you're asked? If people are telling you something that this is what hadith says, and a question arises in your mind, what best you can do is later on consult someone But in the heat of the moment or in the discussion that's going on, I think the best attitude for people who have this inclination of equating the hadith with the Quran is just to remain silent, because there's no point in discussing anything with such people, because they are not intellectually inclined towards discussion. They are more emotionally inclined, and if you question them, it will only create a mess. I think, if you have any experience in this matter, so it's best to just ignore them. I mean, not everything needs to be commented on.
I find it particularly if I'm talking to some Shia friends, they put a lot of emphasis on hadith, their hadith literature and how they understand it.
So, I mean, if you have a question on that literature, you can always consult later on. Just listen to what they are saying, make a mental note. And if you think that what the hadith that they are quoting is not making any sense, you can do your research later on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shehzad. That's the end of the lineup of questions.